Hi, my name is Michelle, and I am an empowerment coach. I am so excited to share with Pearl today.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here.
Hey, everybody, it's Pearl Chiarenza, and welcome to another episode of Soulful Conversations with Pearl today. And so, as you're listening to the show, you're actually going to start hearing a new title to our show. We are in the process of changing our title of our show to Soulful Shero Conversations. And so I'm excited to introduce a Shero that's joining us today. And for those that are just joining are going, what does Shero mean? That means you are stronger, you are happier, you are empowered, you are radiant, and you are that original self that you were brought into this world to be. And my guest today is no different than you are in being a Shero herself. And my dear friend is joining us today. Her name is Michelle Weihman. She is an award-winning nurse with 30 years of experience. She's an empowerment coach, best-selling author, which we were in books together, and host of Dare to Care with
Yeah,
Michelle. She helps women embrace their inner strength, achieve their dreams, and celebrate personal victories, guiding them towards self-discovery and meaningful growth. And Michelle, we've been trying for a long time for us to be on each other's show. And I know I beat you to my show,
I
and now
know.
you're finally on. And you're actually coming on in the middle of us doing this whole new launch of changing our name to our show to call, Soulful Self-Care shows. And so I'm excited to have you as one of our first to help us kick off. And we're going to be doing some fun things kicking us off, but so excited to have you here. And so I always like to start off the show with kind of going back in time to that little girl who, we have this dream of what do I want to be when I grow up? Whether it's, you're a nurse, you became a nurse, whether it was wanted to be a nurse when you're younger, maybe you just wanted to, I've had some people on the show go, I just wanted to be a housewife, or you want to be the president of the United States, whatever that is. I always like to ask, what was that for you when you were that little girl? And how does it correlate to what you're doing today? So would you share that with our audience?
100%. Pearl, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that we did finally get it together and get our time together. And it just, things always happen at the right time. And I was supposed to wait until you were rebranding. I love it. I am so excited about that. So what was it that I wanted to be? And I always joke about my career path. And that's because when my mom was pregnant with me, she was in high school and she was in the Future Nurses of America Club. She did not become a nurse, so I did. I I have always been a nurse. I was the little girl who took the other kids to the nurse's office if somebody scraped their knees. I actually have a doll that I keep. Is this on film or is it going to be only audio?
No, show us the doll. We're
I
doing
keep her
audio
next to
and
me just
video.
for this reason. This is my tender love doll. Yes, she is 50 years old.
She's so
But
sweet.
if you could see in her little leg, you could see all the shots that I've given her as I was growing up. I was always a nurse. I that's what I've always wanted to do. That's what I've always been and what I've always am doing. So that little girl inside me, that's where she was. She wanted to take care of people. She wanted to help people. And after I got also I followed my mom's example. I got pregnant in high school and I had to go back to school. I had to get a GED. And when I took my GED, I got a high enough score that I got a scholarship for a local community college, which was enough to get me through nursing school. And that's kind of where we're at now. Been a nurse
That's
now for, like you said, 30 years.
30 years. Wow. That's so that doll is so sweet. Like and all the little shot pricks and stuff like that. How cool is that? That is so cool. It's interesting too, like when I asked this question, how it and if the listeners are listening, how if you go back and listen to previous episodes, you'll see how it correlates so much to what we do today. I wanted to be a teacher growing up. I thought was going to be an elementary school teacher, but I didn't have the guidance in high school, about this is how you can go get luckily,
Right.
maybe hindsight's 2020. I don't have student loans, but I didn't have that guy. So you can get a student loan and go to school and all this stuff. But it's interesting that here I am today, coaching women and teaching women about putting self first, about taking care of our self care, that about how no is as happy statement as a yes is to in our
Yes.
life, and so I know that it's interesting how it always correlates. There's very few that I've had on as guests that it doesn't correlate to what they
Right.
wanted to when they were little, but oftentimes that's because they had a tragic shift in their life that was
Right.
like, I grew up this way and I never wanted to be that way. So I'm so glad you share that story and share that sweet little baby doll. It actually brought back, a little thought in my head. My mom has had this doll since she was a little girl. My mom's going to be 80 in a couple of days, and she had this doll, and it was actually the doll. Do you remember the dolls? Your mom might have one where they were actually hung. The legs were by wires. They dangled by wires.
Oh,
They want the
yeah.
plastic, right? And she's like, and this doll is scary as heck looking now. If you were to see this
Right.
doll now, like it didn't
Well,
have hair. It had like the fake cement, fake, hair and everything. And so she's like, I must be buried with this doll. I'm like, oh my God.
yeah. Tender love. Her hair is rough, and this is where a dog ate her finger. I tried to sew it back on,
Oh my God, it's so
but I guess
cool.
my skills weren't up to par yet. But yeah, she has been part of my life since I was a little girl,
Oh
and
my gosh, she's just
she
so
went
sweet.
through my parents' divorce with me. She went through all these things with me, and that's what I've held on to.
Yeah, that's so amazing. So you've been a nurse for 30 years. Let's talk about that. That's like, that's a lifetime. I was just I just turned 60 and the other day Chuck and I were having this conversation. I was like going, we were talking about a situation with a family member. I'm like, I don't have time for the BS anymore. I'm 60 years old. I'm like, I probably have 20 years left. I go, so that's like high school? I have high school left in my life. So he's like, he looks at me, he goes, you're correlating what you have left in your life as number of years in high school. I go, yeah, well, think about it. I got 4 years of high school. I go, let's just say it's elementary to high school. Let's just start there. I go, so you know what? I'm gonna live it like I'm this little kid that's in elementary school that's learning all these new things and being open to all this stuff that's happening in
Yeah.
my second act of life, and then as I get to the last 4 years of my life, I've lived a really good, first, 8, 9 years, and so he just laughed because I can't believe how you're correlating this, but okay, but
Yeah.
I mean, 30 years is a long time. And,
It
you've,
is.
you've been through, just as recently as COVID to all these other things over your lifetime in your nursing of the,
Yeah.
the challenges, health challenges you've seen and go around in this world. And so tell us um, a funny story about nursing. Let's talk about a funny story. Your funny, if you look back over your 30 years, what's one of your top two funny stories about in nursing career?
Uh, well, one of them was that I actually I grew up in St. Louis. I'm in Las Vegas now, but I grew up in St. Louis, and I was a nurse in St. Louis. And in St. Louis, I worked at one of the big hospitals. I worked at Barnes Hospital. And so when the Pope was coming to town, to St. Louis, everything was shut down, you know, and there was no elective surgery. So the hospital was really empty, but we all were fully staffed. Everybody was there. And I don't know, for some reason, I decided I wanted to look up the Missouri Nurses Association that day. I mean, I guess we were just sitting around doing nothing. I don't even know if we had internet in our house at that point, because I mean, that was 20, 25 years ago. And so I wanted to look up the Missouri Nurses Association, which is MONA, MONA. And I put in MONA.com, and the hospital did not have blocks on their computers yet. And so MONA.com came up, and it was not Missouri Nurses Association. I was like, oh, get it out, get it out, get it out. I'm going to get in trouble. It was just one of those things. But I mean, that's just all me. There's so many stories. And, with nursing, it's one of those things where, like, I'll walk into a room, and a patient will say, what do you want? All grumpy. And I'll say, hi, I'm here to start your IV. You think you're going to start my IV? I said, oh, no, 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 no. I know I'm going to start your IV. you know, so it's things like that. And we have to bring our own joy. because it does tend to be not as a happy place all the time. But I love what I do. Another good one is when I was doing home care, and I walked into this little old lady's house, and I said she was a little old lady with blue hair. Now that's common, but then it wasn't. I walked into this little old lady's house, and I'm just talking, like I do. And I'm telling her, "Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm going to be your nurse, and we're going to do your we're going to talk about your heart condition, and we're going to do your blood pressure. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." And I went to set my bag on her couch, and there was a snake on her couch, and I was like, "Wow, that's a snake." And she said, "Oh yeah, honey, that's my pet." I said, "Oh well, yeah, he can't be out when I'm here." And she said, "Oh, he has the rent of the house. He does whatever he wants."
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, "No, So I had to call my manager. I'm like, "I can't see her. Why?" I said, "She won't put her pets away." And that's technically like dogs and cats, and I'm supposed to make them put them away. I never did. I
Right.
love animals,
Right.
but I said she won't put her pets away. She said, "What does she have?" I said, "She's got a snake." And she's like, "Okay, yeah, go ahead." And they canceled her
Oh
because
my gosh.
she wouldn't put it away. She said, and she said he was too big. She just gave him the run of the house.
That is so funny to talk about snakes. So the other day I was talking with my girlfriend about snakes. I am petrified of snakes. I do not like snakes whatsoever.
Same.
Chuck and I, we were living in Southern California and we were getting a new place to rent. So we are going to look at maybe renting a house. And so we went up to this house and it was like dusk and we're waiting for the landlord to come and the grass is really tall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this yard's not kept up. And all of a sudden I look at the front porch and there was a snake crawling up the front
Oh
porch. I looked
no.
at him, I said, no, you can tell the realtor we're not like, and Chuck's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I am not going in. He's like, just because in the front, I go, he's going to be in the house somewhere. I'm always going to wonder where he's at, you know?
Mhm.
So no. And then fast forward, our oldest son, Matt, when I think he was a senior in high school, I came home one day and he had this snake on the back patio with him. And I was like, get that thing. Whose is that? He goes, it's mine. I'm like, get that thing out of here. And I'm like, and he's like, why are you so afraid? I'm like, I don't care. I don't have to explain why I'm afraid of snakes. I want it gone. And he's like, what if I don't get rid of it? I go, then you're going to leave with the snake too. And he's like, look at me. I go, I'm not kidding you. And my husband came out and goes, your mom's dead serious. Either snake goes or you both go.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the truth, Pearl.
Oh,
It's just too much. We were on vacation one time when my kids were young, and it was the same thing. Like we were going, oh, we were out west because again we're from St. Louis, so we were out west, out this way, right?
right.
And we went to get out of the car, and there was a sign that said "Beware of rattlesnakes." My daughter said, "Nope."
I would have been right with her. Nope,
She
I'm
just
sitting in the car. You guys go hike. I'm good.
let me know when you're done.
I love it. Oh my gosh. So, thinking about your nursing career and thanks for sharing those stories. I mean, at nurses, that was the one thing any of the times I've been in the hospital or been there supporting others, that was the one person that I always knew that's your first contact. Like that's a person, take care of them, be good to them because when you are, you're going to get you're going to be very watchful. If you're leaving your family member at the hospital, that the nurses are, I always made an effort to really get to know the nurses because they're your front line. You're lucky to get the doctor at 6 o'clock in the morning to call you, that's just come in and see your loved one. And so I always, always had a special place for nurses. And I watched my kids, their friends some of the girls have become nurses and some of the gentlemen. And so it's really, I really commend that, that I think like patience, because like you said, everybody's personality is different. Like you're not going to give me
Yeah.
an IV today, and things like that. And I remember, being in a couple of times and like I remember I went to the hospital one time. I had food poisoning. We were still in Southern California. The Dodgers were. I can't remember. It was my birthday. We'd gone out.
Oh
I
my
used to sell
gosh.
Tupperware, so I'd gone out after my Tupperware meeting for lunch. The girls all took me out, and by the time I got home, I must have had food poisoning. My stomach was so sick. I was really sick to my stomach, but the Dodgers were in the World Series and, they're about to win it was the last game and they were going to win the series. And I can't remember, somebody hit a grand slam and the whole time, like I was supposed to do a Tupperware party that night and I had to cancel because I was so, so sick. And Chuck kept going, I'm going to take you to the hospital. I'm like, no, 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 I got to watch the end of the game, end of the game. By the time I got to the hospital, I was so sick that the
Right.
nurse comes to me. She's like, the one thing I have fear for is needles. She came to me. She's like, I got to give you a shot in my belly button. That's how bad I had food poisoning.
Oh,
And
wow.
I started crying and I'm telling her, I'm so sorry for crying. She's like, Pearl, I've had grown men in their 80s cry over these things. I'm like, okay, okay. But I just remember I felt so bad for her,
Yeah.
But it's to me when I think about nurses too, I think about compassion, I think
Yeah.
about such compassion and so
Thank you.
caring and and loving and like you go home some things you take home, the good, the bad, that comes
Mhm.
along with it, the patients that make it get to go home and the patients that don't, and all the family stuff that comes along with that. And so I wonder, now I know, you and I've been in books together,
Right.
I've spoken, your Christoph has had these great speaking events that I've been honored to speak on his stages with. And so I've watched you evolve. Like I remember when I first met him, you were kind of his helper, you're kind of behind the scenes. And now you're like, I'm going to be on the stage. Look out, and you've been in the books and now you're on this journey of empowering women. Tell us like, how did that evolve? I mean, I know 30 years is a long time, so I'm sure there's about to be a shift in that career situation. And,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
uh, so tell us like, what's led you to doing what you're doing today?
When since I've been in nursing, I doctors have always been above the nurses, and I've never agreed with that. Just as you said, we're the front line. If a doctor would talk to me or my coworkers, because I always ended up being in leadership too, and so if the doctor talked poorly to me or my coworkers, I would just very kindly explain to them who they're talking to. If we don't make these calls, people die you know and so when I came to Las Vegas and I started working in the intensive care unit, and the nurse was to be sitting at the computer charting, and a doctor would stand behind them, not even say a word, and the nurse would get up out of her seat and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, doctor, this is 11 years ago." And I always said, if a nurse is afraid to sit in the chair when there's a computer right next to you, friend, then but he wants that computer, that chair, and the nurse is afraid to say no, then how is she going to call him in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, doctor, I think you made a mistake on this order," or "Hey, doctor, I think you forgot to order these labs"? How is she going to do that if she's not empowered to sit in a freaking chair? You know? So that's kind of where I started. That's where it started with me going, wow, this has got to change. People have to be able to stand up for themselves and for the humans that they're taking care of, because we're not taking care of patients. We are taking care of humans, human beings, family members, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, all, children. And we have to be empowered to say, no, this is my spot. And as my friend Pearl says, no is a complete sentence. So I that's kind of where it started. And then, as one of my friends at one point said, "You are the most empowered person I know." And I thought, well, I want everybody to feel like they have the power to control themselves, their bodies. So that's kind of where that all got started. As my career progressed, and then, like you said, going alongside Christoph, I really wasn't much of a helper. Even I was just kind of the person who stood there and waved and smiled and looked pretty. That was kind of my job at the beginning. And as I have evolved and getting up on stages and getting involved with Galit and Angela and Everyday Woman and the books that we've gotten involved in, it's just become more apparent that we need women like me and you that are out there saying, come on, you can do this. Don't be afraid to do this. And then that I was cruising along nicely, preparing to, saying for the last couple of years, I got to retire. I've done this long enough. I've been in the hospitals long enough. It's time for me to move to the next level, next step. In April of this year, I I tripped over one of my dogs and I broke my foot, and I was off work for 3 months. And in that 3 months, I spent that time at my computer building my Facebook group, building my email list, starting classes, creating classes. I have one called Dare to Empower Her. I have another one called Sage Coaching. So I started creating these classes, creating, journals and affirmation cards, and just doing all this stuff that I love to do, stuff that I need, and saying, okay, let's do this. Then when I went back to work full time, and I was like, oh no, this is not going to work. So I cut back to working 1 day a week now. And the rest of the time, I am empowering women to find their greatness, find the fullness that's in them.
I love how that evolved. I loved how, I want to go back to sitting in the chair. Like I could just see that doctor, sitting there and intimidating that nurse and like, I want that chair. But you're right. If we don't sit in our chair, we don't command our chair, then we let other people command what happens in our lives. It's that people pleasing. We don't command, but I like also how you said then, how is that nurse going to be confident enough to call that doctor in the middle of the night and, talking about the patient that, something's wrong or something needs to be done for or whatever. And it's interesting, like how many times if you're as you're listening to us talk today, Michelle and I talk about how many times in your life are you letting somebody else tell you what chair you sit in?
Yeah.
You are empowered. I mean, like I wrote down, we have the power to control self. Because we
Yeah.
think we don't have that power. And like you said, no, it's a complete sentence. You can say it as happy as you say yes. And you can look
Mhm.
at that doctor and say, you know what? I'm really busy doing these charts right now. There's a computer right here. So
Yeah.
go ahead and grab a seat right there. Otherwise, you can wait till I'm done. Right. Like it's
Yeah.
okay to have those conversations because oftentimes, whether it's at home or at the workplace, we get intimidated by people who have stronger personalities or people we
Mhm.
feel like we don't have that voice for. And like we said, if you don't step into your voice, or I call it step into that Shero self, then you're
Right.
always going to be held back. You're not going to become stronger in using your voice. You're not going to be happier. You're not going to be empowered to do things like what you've done, like say, you know what, I'm going to take these 3 months. It gave me a setback, but it's going to give me the bounce forward of what I want in my career. And then you get to, and also to have the power by doing the work, be empowered to
Yeah.
do the work that when you went back, you're like, yeah, no, not happening. 1 day a week is good. I'm going to go do what I'm loving to do.
Yeah.
Because then what happens is you show up as like we talk about that radiant self. That's what we talk about. That's what Shiro is like, that radiant self. And truly, you're walking in that original path of like empowering others, of showing it care for others, and but also caring for self. And our
Yeah.
need, I wrote down our needs equals others' needs. You took your story like I did, and we took our need that we needed to pour into ourselves and take care of ourselves. And now I show that story forward. I talk about that often, on the show here when I coach, especially I coach for a nonprofit, a group of women at a nonprofit shelter. And I tell them all the time, when you leave the shelter, when you bounce forward to the next thing that's planned for you, write a letter to the lady that's going to put her head down on that pillow because your needs that brought you here are her needs that's bringing her here, and
Right.
let her know she's safe, and they're starting to get it. They're starting to understand about the whole letter. And we're actually going to do an exercise this week where they're actually going to write a letter to themselves as if they had just got there and to where they
Yeah.
are today, and I think it's so important, like sit in your chair. You have to sit in your chair. You have to command your chair if you
Yes.
want to have that Shiro life that you want to live and lead. And I think it's so awesome. I know you and I have been in a couple of books with Galit and Angela, and I love the two of them. They are an amazing team. So
I
shout out
know.
to them right now. I love the
Woohoo.
two of them. But tell us,
Yeah.
like, in being in the book, I know for me, it's a lot of it's because I want to continue to find another way to educate. I want to continue
Yeah.
to get my voice out. I also say to my friend, when I'm no longer here in my my hopefully grandkids someday, but at least my son, when they go back and read or somebody cleans out my house because they got to pack my stuff, they
Mhm.
can look at the book and go, oh, they can look at the story and go, oh, look what she did. Look what she's,
Yeah,
overcome and stuff like that. What's some of the reasons why it's important for you? Let's start with the book with Angela and Galit, the Everyday Women series we've been doing.
absolutely.
And then I have another follow-up question to that. What's important for you to do these type of adventures with them?
Yeah, and part of the reason it's so important is, they call it everyday woman, and it's it's the everyday woman. I actually, my first marriage was very abusive, and I was physically, mentally, and financially abused by him, and so when you by me being willing to tell that story, I'm hoping that that book gets in one person's hand who says, "I need to get out of here." you know and that's the goal for me in writing the chapters. Then again, it's evolved, because I can't write about that all the time, because then it just stays on my mind all the time, right? So it is evolved into some self-care stuff, and to the things that we need to do to grow and to be able to grow into ourselves. I love being in their books. I think that Angela and Galit are so special, and their goal in life is just to empower and help us find our voice. And that's what they've done. I've done private coaching with them, and it's just finding my voice. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's another reason why I like doing it too, is like truly finding your voice and sharing it. And like you said, it's the everyday women. Like we everyday women, whether you are in a
Mhm.
high level position or you're just an amazing CEO mom, because I don't like the word working mom, the stay-at-home mom, but whatever level you are in your life as a woman, we have to understand we're not alone. Like you said, somebody could be listening to us right now that's in a situation that you described. And we want you to know that Michelle and I are here for you. We want you to know that you're not alone, that reach out for help, reach out to us through the
Yeah,
podcast, whatever way
please.
we can support. That's both of our goals. So we want to empower women to know you have a voice, you matter, and you have to put yourself first because,
Yeah,
as we both know, life's not promised tomorrow, it's not promised here. And,
right.
somebody else is going to sit in your job seat. Somebody else is going to take care of your family. If you've got a spouse, they may or may not get married. Like life's going to go on, but what are you leaving behind as that legacy? And
Yeah,
it's so important. It goes back to our need equals other needs. How can everybody has a story. So no matter where you're at in your journey right now, how can your story empower somebody else? I love that we talked about that. So we talked about self-care. You kind of talk about how you and I both are really big about self-care. We,
yeah,
we,
yes.
we know how important it is. So you started this journey. So you took the 3 months, you took this, I tripped over my dog experience. And you said, most people say I trip over my dog to get out of doing stuff. You took it and you said, okay, I'm not going to sit around and eat bonbons all day. Let's do something with this, by golly. So
Right.
tell us how did that come about? I know, like you said, I did a little coaching too with Angela and Galit as well. They're amazing, amazing ladies. But tell us a little bit about how did that evolve and thinking about where you start, because I've watched you grow it. It's really amazing. And think about where you are, where you started and where you are today. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I have some follow-up questions.
Yeah, and like going from where I started, being a 16-year-old girl who's pregnant and dropping out of high school to somebody who runs a hospital on the shifts that she works. That's so much fun. But in my group, I started off my group in April with 800 members. I'm up around 3,100 now, and it's just somehow, and I don't know how, and I don't know why, and I tried to figure out the secret sauce, but somehow I was attracting these numbers of women who were just joining the group, and it was crazy, Pearl. It was a lot of them are nurses, probably 45% of them are nurses, which I think is amazing. And I have no idea what I did, but it's been just the evolution of this group going, where we do journaling challenges and we do self-care challenge where I'll give them a different self-care item every day for a month. And one day it might be reading a book, and another day it might be sitting outside. It's all stuff that's inexpensive or free, but able to do it just because people need to understand how important just taking 5 minutes. And a lot of women will say that they don't have time for self care. And I'm like, no, no, no. You watch TV, you scroll on your phone, you have time to meditate. You have time to stop and take a deep breath. You do, and it's not easy. I'm not acting like it's easy. I was a mother of three kids. Boom, 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 and here it's not easy, but it's so necessary.
It's so true because, I remember when I first started this journey of, I was such a people pleaser. I was like, I got to show up for everybody and anything. I got to wear all the titles and everything. When I finally started on this journey of being like, I need to put me first, I remember like thinking, oh, but my family's going to start thinking I don't love them. Like all those thoughts, people are going to think I'm selfish, and when I started really understanding that I wasn't always showing up the way I wanted to with them, it's like, okay, I need to do something for me, so I'm
Yeah,
present when I am there. I remember
exactly.
I did mortgages in Virginia, and I was one of the top 5 in the company, the top female in the company, and I remember when I look back, I worked so many hours, like, we tried so long to have kids, and then when our kids came along, I was doing really great in my career, and so it was like I was just go, go, go. And I was like looking
Mhm.
back, going, man, if you're listening to us, you have little ones at home, and that sounds like you right now, stop because you cannot rewind the clock. You cannot get
Yeah,
those hours back,
no,
and there's
exactly.
oftentimes I'm like, man, I wish I would have done that, but you can't change it, you can't rewind life. But what once I started realizing I've got to put self first, I started like I actually came home and told my family one day, I'm like, "Okay, I gotta do something for me." My kids were teenagers, and I said, "So I'm gonna go in the room and I may or may not take a bath. I may or may not take a nap. Who knows what I'm gonna do, but you're not gonna see me for at least 30 minutes to an hour. So
Yeah.
unless the house is burning down, your dad can take you to the doctors. I don't need to be bothered, right?" And they all kind of looked at me like I had 3 eyes or something. And then as I started doing the routine, they started seeing, okay. And then I was like, okay, how can I show up for my boys and my husband? So my oldest, Matt, he was a football player, so he had terrible football feet. He had horrible feet. So we would go and do mani-pedis, and I would tell people like, I that's self-care. You could do self-care with those you love, right? And so
Yeah.
we would sit down together, and our nail stylist, she would just crack up because we would talk about sex, we would talk about girls, we would talk about school, we talk about anything and everything. And I mean, I remember one time I was talking about safe sex, and she's like, "You're telling him about wearing it," because I called it wear a coat, right? You need to put a
All
coat
right.
on. And she's like, "You're talking about him having sex." I go, "Well, geez, what am I gonna do? Not talk about having sex? Because we've got to have the conversation, you know? I'd rather
Yeah.
not have little bambinos around than, and so she would just laugh at me. And then my younger son, he was really into movies and, and building computers. So I started doing things like movies and stuff with them. So, or we'd watch a movie at home, like Chuck and I will watch movies at home. So there's
Hmm.
ways to do self-care. If you have little ones at home, sit down and watch. I don't know what they call it now, but I used to watch Barney. My kids watch Barney, right? Like whatever that is for them, sit down with them. That's self-care. You can do those
Yeah.
things with them. And
And
so,
then when you're sitting with them, put your phone away.
yes, 100%. Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
much because it's so important that kids realize I am the most important person in mom's life
Right.
for these 30 minutes while this
Yeah.
show is on.
100%. Yeah. And then one of the things too, as I was going on, I remembered looking back when I lived in Virginia, I had a friend that he would have like, I would see him at least twice a week. I think he had 2 or 3 kids, but I would on average see him with one of his kids having, breakfast or something with them. And I was like, what is that about? He's like, well, I take them since they were babies, and my wife could stay at home, and I take one of them out each week. And as we got 2, I think he had 3. So 3 days a week he was out eating something, whether it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner with one of his kids, not all of them at
That's
one
awesome.
time. Yeah, and he's like, it's an opportunity for us to talk.
Hmm.
I tell him the table's a safe space to say, tell me whatever you need to tell me, and we'll work through it. There's no punishment either. So I started doing that. So when Matt would say, "Hey, mom, you want to go have sushi?" I knew that was, yeah, we both like sushi, but I want to talk. And Nate
Right.
was like, "You want to go to the movies or grab a sub?" That's how I knew that for him. And so you got to find that love language for those that you love that,
Mhm.
that you can pour into, but also you could do self-care around that. Like you said too, put your phones away, turn the TV off if you're not watching TV, like really truly be present because like you said, they're going to know. They're truly going to know. So
Yeah.
I have a question I'm going to ask you while we're talking about this. We talk about legacy, what we're going to leave
Hmm.
behind with our family. We talk about the books and things like that. So one of the things that I always like to ask my question to my clients when I coach them, I talk about like living the Shero life, right? And one of the parts about living a Shero life is how are you showing up for yourself as we're talking about here today.
Right.
So one of the things I like to ask my clients is like, okay, let's say that unfortunately, Michelle, I don't get the pleasure of having you on this earth with us any longer. And tomorrow I have to show up at your memorial and talk about your legacy. But all I can talk about is what I saw Michelle do for self.
Mm.
And that your top 10 closest people have to be able to say something different because you're so amazing. You're gonna have over 200 people. So not all 200 people are gonna talk at your eulogy, but your closest 5 to 10 people may get up and share some stories about you. But all they're allowed to say is what they saw you do for yourself, not the titles you wore, not the job you did, but what did Michelle do for yourself? What are some of the three things that your friends would say they saw you do for you?
Oh, I gotcha. Wow, what a fun question. It so Christoph sees me come into my office to I get up early every day before he does and before the dogs do. I come in here and I meditate. I do my whole morning routine. I meditate, I do my affirmations, I do my journaling, I do all of that first thing in the morning. So that's one of the most important things to me is that I allow myself that time. And so if I make a decision to stay up too late, then I still am making the choice to get up early and do my morning routine that I prefer. So that would be Krista. The people at work, they know that I will take a timeout and I put myself in my office on a timeout. If I start getting too frazzled, if there's too much going on at one time or whatever. And I'll tell them, kind of like you did with your kids, unless the hospital's burning down, please don't call me because I need 5 minutes to breathe. And that's literally what I tell them. I need 5 minutes to breathe. And I go into my office, I shut the door, and they all have my personal cell phone. So if the work phone is ringing, I ignore it for 5 minutes. And I do some breath work exercises. And they all know that. And then so that would be the people at work. And my kids and the grandkids would probably say something about the dogs, about adopting dogs, because that is something that, working with rescues and working with dogs is something that brings me so much joy that would probably be what they would say.
And I love that you create that morning routine. Like that's so, those that are listening, morning routines are so, so important. I have a friend, Julie, she talks about creating tiny habits, like creating a habit around your routine. Like for me, it's
Hmm.
like I get up in the morning, I'm the first one up too. Get up in the morning, I take the dog out, and then I come back in and I do something around, whether it's journaling, meditating, like what
Yeah.
you're talking about. That's that morning routine. And I love that you talk about the time out at work. Like I remember, like it's funny how I do what I do today,
Yeah.
and it's all been since we moved to Florida because in Virginia, when I left the mortgage world for a little bit, I went to go work for a telecom company. And I'm going to really age myself for those that are listening. We didn't have the computers. We could just process and you go online and you make your payment.
Mhm.
We literally got the good old check in the hand and we had to input the check and everything and process the whole check by hand. So we were doing a lot of data entry. And so everything had to be done by the end of the month, like, because your statement was coming out in the first of the month. So we had to have
Right.
every payment process that came in. And so that like the last 8 days of the month, work days were always so busy. And we had to be in these three-piece suits because you're in a business. So now you got to dress the part. And I would have my staff, we would, and we were salaried. So we were staying after hours, not getting
Ugh.
extra pay, sometimes till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to process these payments. And so at one point, I was like, when I took over for the department, I was like, I got to do something for my staff because I know I get tired, late at night. So I started breaking them up in shifts. Like after we've had a lunch break, a morning break, whatever, I'd be like, okay, you two go for a walk.
Right.
If it was cold outside, then they walk in the building. If it was warm outside, I'd tell them get outside. But I actually would have managers come over and go, my staff is getting really frustrated. They don't understand why your staff is getting extra breaks. And I would go, well, do they want to stay till midnight with me tonight? I give them an extra break. And they just
Yeah.
look at me, but even back then I was recognizing how important self-care was. And,
Yeah.
and to do that at your job, like to be that example, especially as, somebody in leadership, because a lot of times our leaders don't remember that just like our kids watch us, your staff is
Right.
watching you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my staff know, like I've had nurses bring other nurses into my office and say, Okay, so I'm gonna leave you here with Michelle, and I'll watch your patients so that you can sit with Michelle. And so we would do some breathing exercises and stuff like that, just to help them calm down and feel better. You Everyone performs better when they take the time to do these things. And one of the things that Kathy Heller is one of the mentors that I listen to. She says, just like you choose your clothes every day, you can choose your thoughts. You can choose your attitude, your mood, and that how important that is to be able to choose that, today I'm going to feel like this. And I know a lot of people who are like, even my son, sometimes my son will drives DoorDash, and I'll call him and say, hey, how's it going today? Oh, it's going really good. I made this much money and I've had these many tips. And then another day I'll call and say, how's it going today? Oh, yeah. And you hear it. And I'm like, oh my God, please make it stop. But I told him, I said, you have to stop letting these people set your mood, because then you're going to continue to have these high days and low days. And high days are good, but those low days based on that, make that go away.
And I love that you said you're choosing your thoughts is just like choosing your clothes. It's
Yeah.
so true. And you're right. Like when we let others control our thoughts, then that can be so detrimental to our life and our day and everything.
Yeah.
I actually did a post, yeah, I think it was yesterday, day before, about, it's like I did a post about helping people that are in addiction, like you want it so bad for them, but you can't make it. They have to make it happen for themselves, right? But
Right.
you have to set boundaries around that. So just like
Mhm.
other people's thoughts, you have to set boundaries of what you're going to let come into your world. Because if you let the negative thoughts come in, then it's going to lead you to have a negative day, right? And so that's one of the things I love to coach on when I work with my clients. I talk about mindset and how we sabotage ourselves and judge
Yeah.
ourselves with those thoughts. And so I'm like, I name my saboteur. Her name is Betsy. And so if Betsy shows up, I'm like, yeah, Betsy, you're not talking to me. And I have an Aunt Betsy. She's amazing. I don't know why I call it Betsy, but she
It's
just
so
came to my
funny.
mind. But I literally will tell her, yep, you're not talking to me like that today, right? I'm like, we're not doing that. We're not doing that today. And it reminds me of I've told the story here on the show before about like Megan Trainor when she had her first child. She was like, she didn't like how she looked, and her therapist like, I want you to stand in front of the mirror naked. How many women are really comfortable standing in front of the mirror looking at themselves naked? They'll
Right.
always find a flaw in themselves, right? And so,
Everyone.
yeah. So she was like, oh my God. So she finally was like, well, she didn't like the little role, and then she's like, "Oh, wait a minute, I have that role because I have my child, and it was so
Mhm.
powerful for me that I remember when my son passed, when Matt passed a couple years ago, I remember looking in the mirror one day and I was like, where'd that wrinkle come from? It's like I had these little wrinkles in the corner of my eyes, and I was like, oh. I went back to Megan Trey. I'm like, oh, those are the tears I've shed for the loss of my son, right? So I
Right.
embrace that, right? We have to embrace our imperfections to really embrace what our life is truly about. And I love that, you set that tone for your clients. I watch you do it. I've been in the groups before when you challenge us to do
Mhm.
things, especially the different journal challenges and self-care challenges. They're always a lot of fun. So tell everybody before we start getting to the next part of the show, tell everybody how they can reach out to you, Michelle, and what anything you have upcoming that they can get it buy into with
Uh,
you.
100%. Thank you so much. Yeah. So my Facebook group is Michelle Renee Weihman. No, it's Dare to Care with Michelle. That's the Facebook group, which is the same as my podcast. And my book is that I have is Dare to Care. The exciting thing that we have coming up is Dare to Care. It's Dare to Care. Book 2 is coming out. It'll be out around sometime in December, and we're not sure. We don't have the date down yet, but and it's similar to the first book in that it's a collaboration book, but this time instead of having all nurses and doctors, I opened it up to wellness professionals. So I have a functional medicine practitioner. I've got a hypnotherapist. I have a Reiki master. I've got people that are really into the health and wellness rather than just the medical side. And in the first Dare to Care book, Dare to Care was it was kind of like the person was writing it for themselves. Here's my story. They were amazing stories. Love them. Here's a story of my friend who was from Afghanistan and came over here to the United States and is now an ER charge nurse. So or here's a story of a girl who was born with cerebral palsy, and then she made it through nursing school with her physical disabilities, and now is a bedside nurse. She works alongside all the others. And so those were really good stories. But this next book is focused more toward the reader. It's focused more toward what you're going to get out of it. Like, for example, one of the nurse practitioners is a pain management nurse practitioner, but she does not use pharmaceuticals. So she's talking to us about some ways that we can alleviate pain by using not using pharmaceuticals. It's just a different approach.
That is such a cool idea to put together for your second part of the book series. Yeah, that
Yeah.
like let the reader get some education out of it and to hear some stories about how that. Yeah, I just was talking to one of my clients slash friend. She's preparing. She has rheumatoid arthritis, and Anne Marie is her name, and she's preparing her first event. She's doing in February, all around rheumatoid arthritis. She's bringing people together to educate that we can still live our life. Around when we change our mindset, we have the right doctors, we do the right exercises, we can still live life with these different challenges, even if it's an autoimmune immune disease. So I love that you're taking this next part, me like, let's educate, let's share story, let's share stories, but educate at the same time. I think it's
Right.
so,
Right.
so awesome. All right. So we're down to a few minutes left. This is a series where I like to know, what is your Shero story? So thinking about, you're stronger, you become happier, you become empowered, radiant, that original self that you are doing because you're doing all the work, right? So you're that Shero, so tell us, like, what is your Shero story? Like, where did you finally go, I finally got it, and now that because I realized I need to put myself first, where did that show up for you?
It's been peeking its head out for a few years now, but truly when I broke my foot, it was like suddenly I got thrown into the I'm happy. I so love getting on the computer, getting on Zoom calls, empowering people, putting out my podcast, all those things. I am so happy doing those things. That why do I want to go back into the nursing world full time? And I love being a nurse. So it's not that I want to leave nursing, but I don't want to go back and do that full time. I don't want to be under the corporate mandates of, here's what we're going to tell you, that we're the changes that we're going to make to the hospital, and you're going to sell it to the staff. I don't want to do that anymore. And so coming into when I broke this foot, and I just found out how happy I could be just doing this and communicating with women and empowering women and helping. And I'm not empowering them, I'm helping them empower themselves, and that's kind of where my Shero story all came across, was when my little blind dog Lily was walking and she stopped in front of me and I broke my toe.
And that's so, I mean, she's like, Mama, I'm sure. She's like, I didn't mean to do that, Mama, but you're. Happy I did it for you now, Mama. I get to see,
Yeah,
but, but
it's so funny. I'll tell you, Pearl. I worked for the same company for a long time, so for 11 years, and I had all this. It's extended sick bank (ELB), and I have 14 weeks of it because the only way you can use that is if you have surgery or if you have a baby. And so I had these 14 weeks of this ELB saved up. And I kept telling my staff, well, don't worry, I'm not going to retire until I use that up, because I'm not leaving that with the hospital. I'm not giving them my money. Right. So I broke my foot. I went straight to an urgent care where they said it, but then it took me 2 weeks to get into a podiatrist for them to look at it. When the emergency room did it, they said it wrong. And so he had to re-break my foot without medicine, by the way. And and then he told me, okay, you need to be off for another 6 weeks. So I'm now at this point, I've been off for 8 weeks. And I said, okay, that's fine. I've got time saved up, whatever. I went back after 6 weeks and he did an x-ray and he said, it's not healing. He said, I'm gonna need you to take another 6 weeks off. And I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But I told I told God that I wanted to use those 14 weeks before I retired. I was off for exactly 14 weeks. And so that was for
There's
me,
a
God
lot to be
saying,
said about manifestation.
true
Maybe
story,
not
man.
that way, but there's a lot to be said about manifestation.
But I didn't have to have surgery and I didn't have to have a baby. All I did was broke my toe.
By walking in front of that beautiful little dog.
Oh my God. And then I had to ride on that little those knee scooters. Everybody thinks those look so cool. They are not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had a friend, she's like, "It's the most uncomfortable thing to do." Yeah. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. She's like, "I hate this thing."
So much.
Oh
So
my God.
much.
So, as we're closing up here, and that's a great Shiro story, because you took something that could have been so overwhelming and you've done something with it. Like you're really making some powerful moves with it. So, tell us we got a few minutes left here before I pull up my cards. Tell us what's one of your favorite. So we know about your routine, but outside of your routine you do in the morning, what's one of your favorite things to do for self care?
I love a bubble bath. And I found I actually took a class one day on using flowers in your bubble bath. So I go and buy flowers depending on what mood I'm in, and you just take the petals and you do it with intention, and you put them in the bubble bath, and then a candle, a glass of wine, and then I don't, no TV, no reading. I just ease into it.
That is so beautiful. I love that story. But flowers in a bubble bath. Oh, you have to send me information on that class. I need to check out that class. That's
Yeah, for
awesome.
sure.
But this has been so much fun. I just can't wait for me to connect with you and start doing some little, whether it's bubble baths, some morning routines, or find their own Shiro story without tripping over a dog, maybe. But really at the end it's like sit in their own chair. I'm excited that you and I sat in our chairs today to have this time together. But before I let you go, everybody knows that on our show we do our better questions, better life cards.
All
So
right.
I'm going to shuffle them. You tell me when to stop. We're going to have you answer one of the cards. So here we go. Tell me when to stop.
Oh, stop.
All right. Your card says, how do I want, well, we did this one. How do I want to be remembered? Let's pick a different card. Tell me when
Okay.
to start again. We did that one. I asked you that question. Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right. Here we go. What if I were great? I think you already are great, but what if you were even greater?
I, one of the things that we like to do is we like to bring the greatness out in people. And I think in order for me to feel great, it's also me bringing out the greatness in others. And so that would be my what if I were great would be bringing it out.
And you're doing that. I'm watching you do it, and I'm so honored that you were on my show to share your story and your Shiro
Oh, thank
story,
you.
and be part of our Soulful Shero League show. And I am excited to put you out to the world to my listeners. And I'm so honored I've gotten to be on the show with you and your listeners. And I just wish you the best. And I cannot wait to see all the growth you're about to have.
Oh, you too. So excited. Thank you so much, Pearl. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
No rain.